To be honest, the last few anime seasons have been less than amazing. For me, at least. Just more rom-coms and harem shit. But I always notice that there's a diamond in the rough with each season, and in the previous summer season, that particular diamond happened to be Shinichiro Watanabe's Zankyou no Terror. I've always had this weird fascination when it comes to stuff about terrorism, whether it's a book or a movie or, in this case, an anime. It was just always a really interesting subject to me. Hell, one of my favorite movies is Sound of Noise. I guess I was always interested in acts of terrorism, public reactions, and why someone would do something like that. Am I sounding like a psychopath? Yeah. Despite the fact that he's only been directing since the early 90s, Shinichiro Watanabe has garnered quite a well-sized and respectful fan base, and for good reason. Cowboy Bebop, Samurai Champloo, plenty of other good shit, but the real question is, does Zankyou no Terror stand up with these other great works Watanabe has made in the past? Well, that's why you're watching this video. Silly. Like I said before, the thing that really drew me into Zankyou no Terror was the premise. It wasn't just an interesting idea within the season, it also happened to be a pretty damn interesting idea in the anime industry as a whole. The story follows 9 and 12, two dudes who happen to be terrorists. Oh, and there's Lisa. She's pretty fucking adorable. As these two protagonists start to bomb Japan and commit acts of terrorism, the Japanese government reacts and tries to stop them. While the premise had me pretty excited, the first episode had really disappointed me. And as I continued on with the rest of the show, the original setup began to irritate me even more. Can we just address why 9 and 12 were even at the high school? The high school serves as nothing more than a plot device for the characters to meet Lisa. And admittedly, they use the school for an event later in the series, but I still think they could have easily met Lisa on the sidewalk or in the skyscraper in the first episode. I mean, clearly, she's so fucking cute, you could see her a mile away. Other than that, the first episode, and one or two events later on, the high school makes no other appearances. It felt completely unnecessary. Really, the anime has two different focuses, the terrorists and the police force. Granted, one could consider the police force to just be a subplot, but I felt as though it was covered enough to be a main focus. And Kanejiro was hot as fuck. And it was these two focuses that was one of my favorite parts about Zankyou no Terror. Mostly because for the first half of the show, it's hard to draw the line between good and evil. The two main characters are lovable and seem harmless at first glance, and since they are the main characters, it's difficult to paint them as the villains. However, about halfway through, that blurred line becomes a bit more clear when a third party is introduced. Which, by the way, is really bad at speaking English, despite being American.
Prop to one pass activity log.
Yes, ma'am.
Put it down to users active in the last 15 minutes.
Yes, ma'am.
爪が甘いわよ。ない。
I'd say Shinichiro Watanabe is pretty damn good at weaving together a fantastic and suspenseful thriller. A lot in this anime isn't really explained whatsoever, and while the character motivations and reasoning becomes clearer as you get closer to the end, there's always this feeling of ambiguity amongst the characters, more specifically the terrorists, especially 5, and that's the best part about this. The anime never concretely establishes why either of the main characters do what they do, what message they're trying to send, or why they committed these acts of terrorism in the first place. Nothing is set in stone, leaving most reasons up to the assumption of the viewer, and it's absolutely genius. And it's for this reason this anime creates a strange, suspenseful feeling from the first episode onwards. And this will probably be the first and last time you'll ever hear me say this, but I feel as though Zankyou no Terror could have done well to have more episodes. 13, or perhaps 15. Some parts do feel rushed, which is jarring to say the least when most of the anime is well paced, and it's not too insanely fast or not boringly slow. Certain things could have been explained, and perhaps even some events could have been covered more thoroughly if Zankyou no Terror had a longer running time. Maybe take time to develop Lisa a bit more. And that's not to say I didn't like her, because goddamn I do horrible things to her. I'd have to say Zankyou no Terror has a fairly refreshing art style in its respective season, except for Hana Monogatari. You can't beat that shit. The animation also shines through in Zankyou, and while I will say there isn't much action or movement amongst characters, the explosions and moments where characters actually are in action are really well animated and look fairly accurate. And while I'm on the topic of production, holy shit, the soundtrack is amazing. Yoko Kanno is an amazing compositionist, and I have the utmost respect for her and her work. She really brings moments to life in the anime with her music that otherwise would have been boring without her talent. And holy shit, that's one of the best openings in the last few seasons, ever. Overall, is this something comparable to, say, Cowboy Bebop or Champloo? I think, while a bit underwhelming, it is another good anime for Watanabe to add his list of achievements, and shows that he still hasn't lost his touch.
Houses and fields
News.